Hey everybody, welcome to Away Games episode 101, and we have a special treat for you this time. Some actual Cubs news happened. Boy, it feels like that it has been a while since been able to say that.
It has, yeah.
Yeah.
It has been some time.
I'm Kevin. I'm Kevin McCaffrey, one of the two people doing this podcast. The other one, we got the other normal one. This is the original cast here. Adam Amawala coming in from L.A. What's up, Adam?
How you doing? I mean, I'm part of the original cast. Normal is a stretch, but
Sure.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm good, man. I picked the saddest week to go to LA ever.
Yeah, it is. We're bi-coastal right now. I'm in New York, Adam's in LA, and yeah, obviously it's Kobe stuff happened a couple days ago, and you've been sort of right in the middle of that. I'm sure. What's it been like over there?
It's been kind of how you would expect. It's like there's just like a cloud hanging over the whole city.
Mm-hmm.
It's very. I didn't intend to to get into all that immediately, but it's been very sad, and it's hard to imagine any other athlete or just person having that kind of impact on a city when they pass away. Like I'm literally trying to think of like anyone in the world who would make a particular city that sad if they weren't here anymore. I guess maybe Michael Jordan in Chicago, but like
right. Yeah, Jordan.
It's hard to think of anybody else who's that like tied with one city.
Yeah, I mean, because it's not during his playing career, but he's a guy who, has continued to be visible. I mean, he won a friggin' Oscar, so it's not like he's not working. And just in sports, it's unique in this era to have anyone who's a one team guy his whole career. So one team guy's whole career, and then like obviously producing movies and stuff out in Los Angeles. He's extremely tied to that city, and it's an insane thing. I mean, I can't remember the last headline I saw that I thought was a hoax so much, and it sort of still feels like a hoax,
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Anyway, more on that sadness later.
Sure, but
there has been a lot of Cubs stuff. One of which just I guess the news broke like today, right, or last night.
Yeah, this broke. So this episode is probably dropping a couple hours after the news dropped. But this morning on Wednesday morning, the Chris Bryant grievance was settled. So it was settled in the way we all thought it would. So of course they definitely had to take 5 fucking years to figure this out. That the Chris Bryant is not getting a year knocked off of his commitment to the Cubs, or commitment. I mean, I guess, you sign a contract when you're drafted, but it's a standard amount of years. And so he lost the grievance. Obviously that has implications with other free agents. And I think that's going to be a big thing in the next collective bargaining agreement, where players are going to try to get a more fair way for teams to handle service time,
Yeah. So, I mean, looking at it, I think you and I both have the same feeling on this, which is like, yeah, it's better for the Cubs if he loses, but kind of just as somebody who wants what is right to happen, it's hard to say that he didn't have a good case to win that grievance.
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, it's like he definitely... I think how I feel is what the Cubs did is definite bullshit, and in the way of the league, it is the consistent bullshit.
Yeah, there is precedent for it, for sure.
Yeah, it's consistent.
The precedent is wrong.
Right. Yes, I think that's the thing, right? The precedent is wrong, but it is the precedent. And how the law works in so many ways is the unjust thing happens because, just logically that's what the case says. So I get why the ruling was this way, because there was no real new thing that happened to make this any different than the cases that have come before. But at the same time, it's, I think Chris, we all know how he got jobbed out of that year,
I would guess that part of the decision to, rule against him is that they didn't want to open up a can of worms for a bunch of other dudes to do this exact same thing whenever their service time is up a year after it should be.
Hugely, yeah. So, I mean, I think the good thing, Chris Bryant really kind of took the bullet for and Maikel Franco as well, for the MLBPA going forward with this case and being the focus of it, sort of to try to set a precedence and move all that forward. So how it affects the Cubs now is Chris Bryant is under contract for 2 more years, as we thought he would be. And then, obviously, Chris Bryant's been at the forefront of trade rumors because of the Cubs' real big want to get under even the first luxury tax threshold. But so, I mean, the idea of even trading Bryant, the best trades that could have been offered a lot of those are off the table now because teams have made their moves and filled those holes, right?
Right.
So I think the big rumor that's being floated around right now, Jesse Rogers just talked about it on the radio, was that apparently the Cubs and Rockies have discussed a 1-for-1 swap of Arenado for Bryant.
Why would that be something that both of those teams would want?
The Rockies would be doing it strictly to get to shed Arenado's contract.
And he has what? He's in the midst of a 9-year deal?
Arenado, Arenado's contract takes him through 2026 right now. And the average salary as far as luxury tax concerns, he's making $32.5 per year from here until 2026. And Chris Bryant is not making that amount of money this year. He's under contract for the next 2. Arenado does have an opt-out after the second year as well. So in theory, these guys could both be free agents at the same time.
But if the Cubs made that trade, how is that helping them financially? Is it that the Rockies would continue to pay part of Arenado's salary?
Yes, the Rockies would be sending along money, probably just to even out what it would be between Arenado and Bryant would be my guess for this year, because Arenado is making more than Bryant right now. So my guess is that the Rockies would be doing this to get out from under the heft of all that many years and that much money from Arenado. It's sort of like like the shitty NBA expiring contract deals, where it's just like, well, Bryant's a free agent earlier, and the Rockies would be acquiring him to get rid of him. You know what I mean? They would be using it just to shed salary. Whereas I guess the Cubs would be doing it because Arenado's a great player, but it's like almost having the contract already negotiated with Chris Bryant.
Right.
Arenado also has a no-trade clause, but apparently the reports are he would waive it for the Cubs, as you imagine he would. It seems like he wants to get out of Colorado, and, pretty good destination.
And also, considering that the other team that seems to be linked to him more than anyone is the Cardinals, you wonder if there's a part of it where it's like the Cubs just want to play keep away from the Cardinals.
Yeah, I mean, that could definitely be a part of it, too. So it's just immensely frustrating, and that this grievance took this long to settle because now the options are so limited. And I think we're both on board with you would like to keep and ultimately extend Chris Bryant. I think that's, if you like winning baseball games, I think that's the best thing to do.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, but
can we file a grievance over the length of time the grievance took?
Yeah,
or can we just get caught in some sort of wormhole?
Yeah, do we go back in time? We need a string theorist to be our next guest.
We've talked about it so many times, but it's like, what happened there? Like, did everyone just read like one word of it per day for years?
I am actively angry about it, and someone needs to explain why it took that long. Yeah. Rob Manfred needs to be sat down and explain why this is the heads of the Players Association too. Everyone needs to whoever's in charge of this arbitrator needs to answer for it because it is unnecessary, and it's affected how the Cubs go forward baseball wise. So I mean, basically it seems like the options are at this point for the Cubs, you're keeping Bryant or some sort of deal centered around Arenado. So I guess that's at least the grievance is done. So at least whatever is going to happen, even if it sucks, will happen soon.
Did Bryant make any sort of statement about it?
Not that I've seen yet. I don't believe so. I'll do a quick Twitter check.
And the other thing that's frustrating is that it's also the length of time that it's taken to get this done has also given the Cubs a bullshit excuse for why they've been so stagnant. Yeah, that's true.
I mean, they didn't sign a player to a major league contract until technically, yesterday, I think.
Susan Jeffress, baby.
Yeah, Susan Jeffress. So, I mean, yeah, and as
I don't mind either of those guys.
Same.
But not as the only moves.
Right.
We're talking about a fourth outfielder and a reliever coming off injuries.
Yep, and a reliever who he was ineffective in Texas and ineffective last year while injured. He was good with Milwaukee otherwise in Toronto as well, Jeremy Jeffress. And I think Jeffress is a cool signing. That's good. They didn't pay much for him, $850,000 on a one-year deal. That makes a lot of sense to me, is what I believe his deal was. Souza is for a year and $1 million, and it looks like the incentives could take it up to $2 million if he ends up basically getting a regular's amount of at-bats. But yeah, Souza's a guy who also coming off an injury, and the year before that hit 30 homers, stole 16 bases in Arizona. So he's, as you said, you'd be looking mainly as a fourth outfielder. He played some center earlier in his career, but coming off an injury, I don't think you'd feel super comfortable about playing him in center. He'd be more of a right field guy to pair with Hayward.
You wonder if they're going to like trade Almora somewhere, because I don't see why you would even acquire a guy like Souza if you do. Are the Cubs really still in on Almora being a close to everyday player?
I don't think close to every day at this point. I don't think you're talking about starting Almora much at all going into this year. But he's sitting on, I believe the contract he settled on is like $1.8 million. He has options so he's going to, I think what you could see them do is do what they did with Ian Happ last year. And Almora end up spending a lot of time in Iowa in this option year, getting regular at-bats and trying to get himself figured out offensively. And so I guess bringing in Souza gives you a little cover for that. But then you're looking at a team that arguably has no true center fielder, too. Not that, I don't want Almora starting in center field anyway. I want Ian Happ starting there every day. Nico Horner played there a little bit in the minors, but that he's not, that's also not a natural center fielder. Jason Hayward can play over there, but it's a weirdly constructed roster. There's some glaring weirdnesses here that are still unfilled at the end of January.
It makes me really sad, but in this moment, I'm like as pessimistic about going into a Cubs season as I've been in a really long time.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how everybody's feeling, and I don't know why we feel any other way. The Reds just signed Nicholas Castellanos as well. That's another thing that happened this week.
There's a part of me, honestly, that hopes he beats the shit out of us. Like,
sure, yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
well, you want the people,
go hit 400 against us.
You want Sorry, go ahead.
No, just.
Yeah, you want the people who made the bad decisions to pay for it. You want your team to win. Obviously, neither one of us is like, I hope the Cubs lose. But it is very frustrating to watch the Reds spend a lot of money, get better in way. And Castellanos wanted to come back here, And if you were playing to win this year, that would have made a lot of sense. I'm sure you saw.
He also didn't even get that much money.
Yeah, it was 4 years for 64, I think. Was that what it ended up being? With, weirdly, an opt-out after 1. So that's interesting. So,
What were you saying? Did I see what?
Just that photo of Castellanos after the Cubs' last game where he's sitting in the dugout sort of taking in Wrigley after there. It's just like, man, that guy liked being a Cub. And that's not the main reason you keep a guy. But it would have been really fun to see him running out on opening day. I know every day's opening day for him, but,
Well, yeah. I mean, I think he and all of us felt that there was some unfinished business there, and I know that I'm sure it was hard on him to not be able to play in any playoff games for the Cubs. So it really sucks that that's our lasting image of him. And listen, I'm not stupid. I know that the production that he had over the months that the Cubs had him is not something that was going to be sustained. I mean, he was hitting at almost an impossible level. I don't know what his OPS was, but I feel like it was over 1,000.
It was over 1,000, and with minimum 100 at bats, granted a very low bar to set, but he has the highest OPS in Chicago Cubs history. I believe. Right. I think or maybe that's slugging. Maybe that is just slugging, but either way, I know number 2 is Rogers Hornsby. So that's the stat I saw.
And then 3 is Fontenot.
3 is Mike Fontenot. Yep, very big man, very big in the power department. Yeah. So but in terms of feeling pessimistic, I mean the Reds got a lot better. They had a good pitching staff before, which used to be their problem. That offense looks great. The Cardinals were better than the Cubs last year. They haven't gotten much worse. I mean they lost Ozuna, I guess, but
how scary is the prospect of Arenado and Goldschmidt in a lineup?
Yeah, I mean that's first and third combo that would be pretty sick. And they're both guys who are locked into contracts for a long time, so it's like that you'd be seeing those guys for a long time if the Cardinals make that deal for Arenado. And the Brewers, they're good. They're going to be better than they appear like they should be.
They'll lose half their team and then they'll win 25 out of 30 games in September.
Yeah. So this is the first year since 2015 where you can see a world where this Cubs team finishes fourth. And I don't think they will. We're not doing our preseason picks yet, but I won't be picking the Cubs to be fourth, but I wouldn't be picking them to win right now. And that's the first time since we've been doing this podcast. That's
the thing. There's of course they still have they still have great players, and there's still a path for them to win the division even as they're constructed right now. But for any of us to delude ourselves into thinking that this roster, as constituted, is a World Series winning team, it's anyone can win a World Series if you get to the playoffs.
Right.
So that goes without saying. But they're not in my mind, they're not a top tier team.
Yeah,
at least in that stratosphere of this is a team that definitely should be competing for a World Series.
No, they're definitely not. This team as constructed is definitely not the top tier, and for this year, and if anything, it will probably get slightly worse at this point. Because even if you're swapping Chris Bryant for Nolan Arenado, to me, you're not better now. You're the same. Or, basically, Chris Bryant and Nolan Arenado are both superstars. Okay, a trade for that to me, it could make your team better, but it's not, even in a very good Arenado year, he's not going to be that much better than Chris Bryant. So that doesn't really move the needle, even. Maybe it locks up an asset going forward. I could see a world in which it helps the Cubs in future years, sure. But still, that doesn't make them better for 2020. And... yeah. If they're doing that and they're still committed to getting under the first tier of the luxury tax, which it seems like they are, that means they're going to they have to find a way to shed either Quintana or Chatwood. And we're talking about a rotation where we already don't really have a fifth starter.
Mills,
yeah. And honestly, I would much rather shed salary that way than trading Chris Bryant because the fall off from a Quintana to a Mills is... You could argue is not as much, but you'd still rather Jose Quintana than Mills if your only thing is about winning baseball games.
Do you think they have any reservations about trading Quintana just because it makes the Eloy trade look that much worse if they don't even have him for the entirety of that contract?
I don't think it does, and it shouldn't, but it would be, I think, the nail in the coffin in terms of how bad that trade was, because if money was ever going to be an issue like this, then that trade shouldn't have been made. The only reason Quintana was worth that much was because of how affordable he was and under control. That was the whole reason for getting a good starter for affordable locked up money. And then you're telling me in the final year of his deal, you have to get rid of that money, that he's too much for you? Then that's just a bad trade top to bottom the whole way. Yeah.
I always think people are so critical of players for leaving teams to take more money, even someone like a Bryce Harper. But you look at the way trades are made, and as soon as you sign a team-friendly deal or just a long-term deal, it makes you so much more tradable.
Right.
Why be loyal to a team that if you sign a long-term deal, it's just going to make you more of an asset?
Yeah, that's true. Same thing happened with Chris Sale, too, and I'm sure he's, he went and won a World Series, but still, that's a guy who signed a long-term deal and was dealt because of it, basically.
I guess it's a little different with Arenado because he seems unhappy. Yeah.
And understandably so, but that's the danger in signing a long-term deal with the team, I guess. Yeah, so I really don't see another world. I don't see another way the Bryant situation shakes out. Besides, apparently they've talked about an Arenado deal, or you keep him. And I guess there's elements of both those things that I like. I like having Nolan Arenado. I think a team trying to win the World Series would try to get Nolan Arenado and keep Chris Bryant, as was briefly rumored a couple weeks ago.
But are we kidding ourselves to think that Bryant is an everyday outfielder?
No, I think Chris Bryant would be absolutely fine in right field.
And probably would improve if he were there all the time.
Yeah, good athlete, runs well. Has a very strong arm, an underrated strong arm. Granted, infield throws are different than outfield throws, but
yeah, I don't know. He seems. I don't know. I feel like he's much more of a left fielder to me in terms of his abilities, and there's already somebody there.
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, yeah, I think so. But I think I wouldn't be worried about Chris Bryant in either corner defensively, really. I mean, he'd be a drop off from Jason Hayward, of course, but defensively. But I think the offense would be way more than enough to make up for him because Jason Hayward is not a superstar. He's a good guy and a good enough player. We shouldn't call people superstars when they're platoon guys who did well in a very specific scenario. No offense, Bleacher Nation. Yeah.
Great abs, though.
Great abs. Oh, man. Yeah. Guy's shredded. Yeah.
I mean, but let's say the Cubs don't trade Bryant and they're, 500 or under 500 come July, then they probably trade him, right?
I think you'd absolutely have to. Yeah. I think you'd absolutely have to at that point, unless you're making a real serious pitch for an extension, Like if you're really not going to make Chris Bryant a serious offer for an extension or go into his final year planning to make the biggest offer to him, which is tough, but you do have the thing is he's on your team, so you are the incumbent here. You have the advantage to be having ongoing negotiations with this guy and to feel out what would it really take. You have the advantage of that. So they have to figure that out. But yeah,
what did they offer him?
I mean, we don't know what they offered him exactly. I think there was rumors about maybe an 8-year $200 something along those lines, but a couple of years ago is when I heard that. I think right now you look at the Arenado contract basically as the model for Chris Bryant,
Right.
So, and I would give Chris Bryant the Arenado deal today. And if the Cubs are willing to take on Arenado's money, I think what they should do is offer him exactly the Arenado deal today as well and get his feelings on it,
Right.
It's a good reason to do that. But we don't know. I mean, at least we should all be glad that we might be closer to some sort of direction somehow, because the Cubs just haven't had that. And the only direction has been, help me, I'm poor. Let's shed some of this money. That's been the whole.
I mean, spring training starts in a matter of weeks at this point.
Yeah,
at least catchers.
Less than a month. It's a couple of weeks, and it's been 2 off seasons in a row like of this, which is just not. That's not how. That's not how a true contender big market team should be operating.
No, I would think too. Like, I don't think Bryant wants to be traded.
I think Chris Bryant. Yeah.
Maybe he does, but I think he likes Chicago.
He's said he would like to be a Cub forever, and and I absolutely believe that. Just his personality type. It seems like he's comfortable here, and he's a guy who values comfort and a guy who values winning. And these are places. This is a place you can do that. Yeah.
But I don't know. I would agree that if the Cubs are really saying we only have the means to extend Bryant or Baez, I'm kind of on Team Baez.
Yeah, I think because first of all, we'd have to see what the money is, but the assumption is that it's kind of significantly less to lock down Baez, and we're talking in the range of, in the projections I've seen, in the range of maybe 80 to 100 million less overall. And in that case, yeah, I sort of agree. I think finding a franchise shortstop is more difficult than finding someone who can put up big damage at third base. Third base. Third base and shortstop both are deep positions in the league right now. But typically, it's easier to find a third baseman. It's not easy to find a Chris Bryant. There's not a lot of people who are legit potential Hall of Famers floating around like he is. But yeah, if you're only going to extend one, I think when you factor in the money, and basically you're telling me the money you're saving is Castellanos and then some worth money. Castellanos signed a deal for 4 years, 64. So if we're saying the difference between Bryant and Baez is that and plus another $16 million for a player, yeah, I think then you could absolutely make that argument.
Speaking of potential Hall of Famers, Dusty Baker.
Your boy, our old dude.
One last shot.
Dusty.
One more.
You got to appreciate. So the Astros hired Dusty Baker to be the manager, and you got to appreciate the Astros with all the problems they've had. Of their own doing this offseason, being like, you know who will not get us in technological related trouble? You know who is not going to be too analytic and too tech savvy to cheat? Dusty Baker. I'm sorry.
Remember all the great stuff we did with pitchers?
Yeah. Yeah. Do we have a monitor hooked up to his gut or grit in the behind the dugout?
I'll tell you, from my experience, you cannot hear when a toothpick is banging against a trash can.
It's a very tiny tap. Yeah.
He's hitting it against like a Coca-Cola can.
Yeah. He's just, I'm happy for
Dusty. I
like Dusty.
I feel kind of bad for the guy.
I actually like Dusty fine as a guy. I think he made mistakes. He didn't make a ton. He didn't make unique mistakes. I think that's a lot of the way he managed was a lot of how the game was at that time.
You are saying you wouldn't have let Mark Pryor throw 180 pitches in a 13-2 blowout?
No. Yeah, Dusty ruined some stuff, for sure. But no, I don't hate Dusty, and his teams like him, He seems like a good guy, and the Astros seem to be packed full of assholes, basically, so...
He's like the good luck Chuck of managers. Like, he leaves the Giants, they win. He leaves the Cubs, they win. He leaves the Nationals, they win.
That's true. Yeah, it took a year and a skip. Yeah, he's... I guess
I'm sorry to reference a terrible Dane Cook movie, but I think that's what that is.
I believe that's a pretty accurate comparison, though. That's a good analogy. So Dusty got a job. Good for him. And the Mets, I forget if we talked about this last week, but they lost their manager before he ever managed a game, which Mets fans tell me is very Mets.
Well, the Astros who have spoken about it I don't know if they've ever seen an apology before, but that's not that.
No, and it's been very disappointing because I actively liked a lot of those players.
Oh, yeah.
And
Altuve especially.
Yeah, Altuve seems to be flat out a liar. Alex Bregman is being a real fucking wimp about it. He's just, you can't be the guy. I liked Bregman, and you can't be the guy who runs your mouth all the time, and then as soon as you get busted on something I'm just here so I don't get fined. I don't know. I'm only allowed to say certain things. You got a YouTube channel, bro. You've basically set up your whole brand to be a guy who's accessible and talks and is real, and now when there's actually a chance to man up, he doesn't. So, fuck that, man. That's really disappointing from Alex Bregman.
Keuchel, too. Like, Keuchel spoke... I don't know if you saw that.
Keuchel came the closest to saying anything real, right? He was...
Yeah, but it was also like, but we didn't do it all the time.
Right, which is just unnecessary to say. It's like, yeah.
I wasn't cheating on you every day. Why are you being such a bitch about it?
And, oh, man, and there are guys who have said exactly that verbatim, too. Like, last week I didn't, so, yeah. Yeah, the Astros that's an interesting thing going into this year. It's like we got a real heel to root against. The whole league gets to hate the Astros, which is probably good for baseball,
I think Verlander was joking about it at some sort of like award ceremony too. And that's the question that I've asked myself is like, clearly the pitchers weren't necessarily benefiting from this, but they certainly knew about it, you would think. And like, how does that make you feel about someone of Verlander's ilk?
Yeah, well, noted internet D-bag Trevor Bauer has called out the Astros a lot because everyone who goes to the Astros immediately, their spin rates spike in a very suspicious way. So I think...
So what does that imply, though?
It could be a substance they're using to get a tighter, better grip on the ball. It could be any number of things. Basically what Verlander said, I believe it was at the Cy Young award ceremony, was he alluded to the fact of as he was thanking the organization, how analytically advanced they are. Everybody knows about that, referring to the cheating, and some people laughed. Whatever. Verlander, another guy who runs his mouth a lot, and now has nothing to say. Really, another just sort of hypocritical thing, which is disappointing. Another guy I liked, but I think basically we can't count out that these extreme spikes in pitching performance as soon as people get to Houston, we can't count out that is cheating. At this point, they should have no benefit of the doubt in Houston in any way.
No, and that's what's so funny is that it's like any of them who talk about it, it's like, how dare you be asking us these questions? Like, what do you think people are going to ask you about forever now?
It's sort of, not to tie it into that, but it's like we're trying to watch any news about the impeachment proceedings. It's just like, what do you mean? Why would you ask that question about the only thing that matters, about relevant facts? So that sucks. It's a big thing that sucks. Not a fun offseason so far, although I will say today and this week is the best week of the Cubs offseason because literally anything happened. So we're closer to something happening. Not that I didn't get juiced up about the Ryan Tepera signing. Jason Adam, how you doing? But signing Major League Jarrell Cotton, I actually was happy about that pickup, but on a sliding scale. At least Jefferson Souza could be something. And the main thing is we might be closer to figuring out what the hell is going on with Chris Bryant or how this poor team is going to get underneath the luxury tax.
It just feels like the Cubs are in a position now where like they need absolutely everything to go right to be good.
Yeah.
And that's a tough position to be in where it's like, well, we need to have like everybody stays healthy and we need Schwarber to have a big year and have to have a big year. And Kimbrel's going to return to form, and Lester's not going to, and all of these things that are potential pitfalls need to not happen in order for this team to win 90 games.
Yeah, exactly. It's the one hallmark of this team when it's been at its best has been building in redundancy, is a thing Theo likes to say, and depth and basically covering for possible disasters. And this year, things could go well. I think it's likely it'll go better than last year, just because so much went wrong last year, and I think they played so far below their talent level. I think some of it will be some progression to the mean, and some just, and beyond that, I think Schwarber is a real breakout, Happ's a real breakout. But that's still, you get two big injuries, and this team is clearly a fourth-place team, Yeah.
Well, and that's the part of it too. As you've said, the Reds are clearly a better team. Mm-hmm. The Brewers haven't done much, and the Cardinals have done a little. But immediately you've got at least one team that you're facing 16, 18 times. That's going to be a lot harder to beat. And also the Reds give the Cubs a hard time anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I feel like even in years where the Cubs, I have no way of knowing this, but. If you were to go back and look at these past 4 or 5 years when the Cubs have been good, I feel like the Reds, at best, they're like 500 against them a lot of the time.
Yeah. It's a really tough division, and that hurts everyone when it comes to being available for the wild card, too. It makes finishing first so much more important than finishing second, even more so than it was, because all these teams are going to beat up on each other, and so someone from the West or East is going to have a better shot at grabbing those wild card spots, too. Yeah. It's just really, even though I liked the Cubs roster going into this year, they signed Kimbrel halfway through the year, great. It is incredibly disappointing for this to be the approach to bettering your team 2 off seasons in a row in the middle of a historic window, the likes of which we have not seen a Cubs roster ever have.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Fun thing. Follow at Cub Prospects. Our friend Brian Smith is starting to roll out his breakdown of the Cubs prospect rankings. He's ranking 69 of them.
Nice.
Yep. So he's doing that. Follow him as he rolls that out this week. That's really fun. I guess one other piece of Cubs news is that as Baseball Prospectus, Baseball America, MLB Pipeline have all released their top 100 prospect lists. The Cubs have consensus 4 top 100 prospects now, and that has not been the case in a few years.
So Marquez, Amaya, and who else?
Horner.
Oh, right, Horner still.
And Brennan Davis.
Okay.
So, yeah. And Brennan Davis is a guy who's a couple years away from the majors. Miguel Amaya as well, a couple years away. But, Horner could be there opening day. And Braylon Marquez is a guy who he's, 6'4", 100+ mile an hour left-handed pitcher. you could see a world in which that guy gets a September call up to pitch out of the bullpen. You know, I don't think it's likely. Yeah. I don't think it's likely, but you could see that world, and I think he's a guy who you expect to see within the next 2 years for sure.
Speaking of which, I was talking to my Mets friend Adam about some of the rule changes coming into this year. Is it true that in September, rather than a 40-man roster, it's going to be 28?
Yes. So it's going to be, they're shortening the amount of people you can call up to be in the dugout for each game.
That's a huge. How do you go from 40 to 28? Why not go from 40 to 34 if you really want to It just seems like an arbitrary and kind of abrupt thing to do.
It is. It's I think it's certainly to some degree arbitrary. I guess it's just trying to keep it closer to how baseball is the rest of the year, because I think when you go to 40 players, it really changes the shape of each team. The percentage.
Yeah, and I understand the argument that if a team that's trying to get into the playoffs is facing a non-playoff contender, an incredibly meaningful moment might be decided by some guy who's spent most of his career in the minors on the mound against somebody who really needs to win a game, which I get. But from the perspective of minor leaguers who otherwise wouldn't get a cup of coffee now not getting that chance, that really sucks.
Yeah, I think I think the bummer of it is there's less chances to have a Taylor Davis moment. Taylor Davis, who signed with the Orioles, by the way. So hopefully the Orioles, pretty good minor league team. So hopefully Taylor will get.
I was going to say, I feel like Taylor Davis has got to be a starting catcher on a team like that.
Yeah, he's got a good shot. So that would be great. I hope he gets up there and makes some money. That guy's awesome.
Which, by the way, one of our tweets that went viral, which is I'm saying with the caveat within Cubs Twitter,
sure,
involved Taylor Davis last year, and it was about just how cool that moment was for him, given that he's a career minor league sort of guy.
Oh yeah,
and there were a few people who were very defensive about that, and how you piece of shit, why would you say that? It's just. Please look at reality. My God.
Well, and you weren't saying he'll never make the majors again. You're saying he has been a career minor league player. That is true to that point. That is right. That was binary. I hope he plays in the majors from here on out. But when you were saying,
I don't mean to be a real Len Casper about it and be how could someone disagree with me on Twitter?
Yeah, 3 people were mad, and I don't know what's going on.
But yeah, I mean, it was immediately when I remember watching that game live, and you felt immediately that is so for the rest of this guy's life, he has that moment, even if he comes to I bet he's the sort of guy who will be invited to a Cubs convention in 10 years, even though he's a very obscure sort of guy.
Sure, and I think he seems like such a well-liked guy and a smart guy, a catcher pitchers like throwing to. I mean, that's a guy who, if he wants to have a role as a coach or something in the organization, and just a charismatic guy too. I mean, it seems like he's got a life in baseball after his playing days if he wants it too. So we hopefully haven't seen the last of Taylor Davis.
He is as good at finding the camera as the NFL Hall of Fame guy is at avoiding it.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw that when he told Bill Cowher and what's his name,
Jimmy Johnson,
that they got into the Hall of Fame, and they had to keep moving him because he just didn't understand the concept that you have to cheat your body out towards.
Right. He's just straight up got his back to it, just mumbling away from the microphone. Yeah. So that's fun. So we got some prospect lists rolling out. That's some good reading. Couple of new actual major league Cubs and hopefully closer to Chris Bryant stuff. Is there any other Cubs news to talk about? At least we had some real stuff this time.
No, I don't think so. I mean, the Castellanos thing didn't surprise me, but it did bum me out for sure.
The fact that it was the Reds surprised me a little bit. It's those guys are really trying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They seem to have a ton of outfielders too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Aquino, is that right?
Aquino and
Jesse Winkler.
Senzel.
Nick Senzel. And Castellanos. So it's and Shogo Akiyama.
Does
Japanese player
play? Is he mostly first base?
Yeah, he's played first.
No, he can't because Votto's there.
Right, but he's played first and second and outfield. He's played all, and I'm not even sure he's with the Reds anymore. But they also signed Shogo Akiyama, the Japanese center fielder who the Cubs theoretically had their eye on.
Right.
They have 4 or 5 potential starting outfielders, and they got a really good rotation, especially if the Cubs deal, if they lose from the minimal depth they have, getting rid of a Quintana or even a Chatwood. I mean, then you definitely say the Reds have a better rotation too. So it's dicey, but I'm still looking forward to it. I'm like real baseball. Give me real baseball time. Let's figure out what this team actually is.
Yeah. I think the real test of all of our fandom is going to be like, and I don't think it'll be this year, but like when the Cubs are truly bad again, will we be able to still watch them the way that we have over the past few years? I question that of myself because I'll be honest with you, I'm not watching the Bulls that way.
No, I'm not either. And God, an organization that's run worse than any possibly in sports, Garpac's just truly horrendous for so long. I also don't. But I think you and I are both the kind where when the Cubs have been truly bad, we tune out a little, but not as much, Yeah. Also, this is just, and all the talk about getting under the luxury tax this year, in theory, is so that there never is a true rebuild, in the near future. Right. Which, there shouldn't be, there should never be, yada yada. Win now,
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I think we're covered on Cubs stuff. Any other Kobe thoughts on the end from Los Angeles?
Well, it just it was a very unique experience being here when that news came out, because you could just feel it, and you've been I flew out here on Friday, and everything post that news has a completely different feel to it from the first few days, and I was in Massachusetts right after the Boston bombing, and that's the only thing I can compare to how this city feels right now, which I know seems like a crazy thing to conflate, but in terms of the feeling of an entire town.
Sure, just that it's what's on everybody's mind, kind of everywhere you look.
Yeah, and it's not like I ever considered how might I feel if something horrible happened to Kobe Bryant, but I was far more upset on Sunday than I would have anticipated that I might be, because I'm not a Kobe guy specifically.
Sure,
but I think I just realized as a big NBA fan, his career encompasses my entire life to some degree. He came into, you're a little bit older than me, but I didn't get to watch Jordan's whole career. I got to enjoy Jordan for those last 3 championships and a little bit before that. But Kobe was drafted when I was in 4th grade, and he was still playing when I graduated college. So an entire lifetime of basketball memories that I have, he's so much a part of. And I think, to your point, the fact that he's been so accessible post-career in a way that Jordan really hasn't.
Right.
It makes me even more sad because you just had this feeling that he would have been one of those guys that we got to see him grow old around the game and mentor people and be a part of that. And
his daughter as well.
that is horrible.
And obviously there were other people on this plane too, but but I think what we're talking about is how specifically I think why the Kobe news resonates the way it does. I mean, I learned so much about his relationship with this particular daughter in the
we all just saw that clip a few weeks ago that was kind of going viral of him chopping it up with her on the courtside at a game, explaining stuff, and that's as they've talked more about their dynamic. She was the one of his 4 daughters who loved basketball. Yeah. And dream was to play at UConn, and she, I've seen many videos in the past couple of days, but I mean, she could ball. Especially for a 13-year-old kid, it's.
I think it hits us because the death of an athlete is. I think it makes you confront your own mortality because in a way that other things don't. Because we're sports fans, sure, but they are, they're young. They're also the best of us, and in terms of just physical and achievement and stuff, these are some of the highest achieving people around. So it's sort of if this can happen to them, it can happen to anyone. It's the loss of promise, going forward. It's the loss of a future that now we don't get to see. And I think the way you describe that it hits you because Kobe is tied in with, memories of the NBA from fourth grade to the end of the end of college or high school. You were saying, yeah. I mean, I think that's why I was caught off guard as a guy who, until pretty recently, I think had cried maybe 5 to 10 times in my adult life. I cried I was in the crowd at Kerry Wood's retirement game, and I was shocked that it hit me the way it did. And I think it was because, retirement's different from death, but it's this thing where I realized, oh man, I remember being in high school, coming home, feeling the buzz off of that 20 strikeout game, and not having Twitter at the time, not knowing what it was like. Is this a no-hitter? Why does this feel weird? Why is there a buzz in the stadium? Yeah. That happening with this guy who's 20 years old and then had great moments, but also never fully reached the potential you thought. Individually, I guess he had a great career, but he had the potential to be among the greatest ever. And the Cubs, same thing. He was on Cubs teams that got so close and didn't make it, and then he retires. So it made me think, about my own mortality, where it's like, God, if he's retiring, and when he was playing, everything was the future. It's kind of like Kobe passing now. I mean, we remember when Kobe was a teen, playing, and everything was the future. And seeing that come to an end it's shocking. It's a shocking feeling. And I think
it's also hard to watch everybody else be as sad as they are. Like I don't know if you saw any of TNT did like a special last night where they were just like sitting on an empty, in an empty Staples Center where it was supposed to have been, and watching Shaq and watching Jerry West and these people who like truly were, felt like, to Jerry West, he said that the only thing he can compare it to is like losing his brother in Korea. Like that's the place that Kobe held in his life, was truly like as a son.
Right.
And you do selfishly, you feel robbed of just like that person's presence not being around anymore. And this may be a really unfair thing to say. Not that anyone listens to this, but
they do. Oh, we're in the triple digits.
It kind of bothers me that Jordan is never present for any of this kind of stuff. He's never around.
Yeah, that he's a release a statement guy, basically.
Right. And this is where we need him now.
Yeah,
as a basketball fan, basketball fans need him to just be around.
I think it's it's the complicated part of Jordan too, is that he I don't think he doesn't really have a full human range in some ways, and he probably has to, and people grieve in different ways too. I think that's part of your disclaimer about like maybe this isn't fair, but who knows how he's actually feeling. But yeah, if you're the greatest of all time and other people are coming out and sort of honoring the guy, you would expect to see a little more from him too. And you usually don't. He's sort of gone,
Yeah. But I think while I'm still in town, I'm gonna go over to the Staples Center at some point. There's a whole there's a place called LA Live, which I think is just like a big complex where people watch games and stuff like that. That's next to the Staples Center, where there's this enormous shrine, and I imagine it'll be hard to go over there. It's probably very sad. But one of my closest friends is as big of a Kobe fan as we are Cubs fans, if not bigger. I don't know that I've ever known anyone who cares as much about a person or thing as this guy does about Kobe.
Jesus.
And I was the one who told him.
Oh my God.
And yeah, he asked me if I would bring something over and leave it in his name. So I got to go to, I don't know, buy a Lakers hat and write something on it or something. I don't know. It makes me really sad. I like what you're saying about the Kerry Wood thing. I don't know that I would have anticipated how much this would affect me. Yeah,
it's not exactly the LA vibe you had planned for your West Coast comedy trip. I'm sure day to day. But
no,
but it's
no.
But it's the kind of thing where it is. interesting for you to be able to sort of be at the center of that, and that community at this time. So,
well, I did. It was so uncomfortable at some of the shows I was doing that I feel like there was kind of the need for a little bit of gallows humor. And I mentioned at a show I did recently that, like, I'm here right now during this awful time. And I also weirdly was in Boston in June when the news broke about David Ortiz being shot. And I'm not saying that I have anything to do with that, but I'm a huge Chicago sports fan, and I'm never doing comedy in Chicago again.
Yeah, you're banned from the city. Yeah, it's a tough break for you, but it's good of you as a teammate to not carry your curse into the 312. Yeah. It
was just eerie. Like, Sunday was very when you went outside, it was just quiet everywhere. Like, it was like, that the way they do it in films where there's like an explosion and then there's that weird like quiet afterwards.
Yeah, the ringing and quiet.
Like ringing. Yeah, that's like how LA felt Sunday.
Yeah.
And to just see people like clearly like puffy eyes, like, or actively crying.
Yeah.
Like, from children to like elderly people, it was very bizarre.
It's weird, and like you said, I think it's thinking about it now. There's almost no city to athlete closer tie than
athlete person,
that guy in LA.
Anything.
Yeah,
even like within our lifetimes, you think about somebody notable dying. I guess Michael Jackson, but he was a pretty polarizing figure and also like very troubled in a way that like it wasn't entirely surprising when something like that happened.
He's also older, and not that you should be judged on what you're producing career-wise, but Michael Jackson wasn't going to do a lot of great stuff like from that point forward. And that's a difference. It's less of that's less of a future loss. And I mean, specifically in the world of sports, Roberto Clemente being cut down as, even younger.
Yeah, Clemente, Thurman Munson, Jose Fernandez, obviously, years ago. In terms of how somebody's death affected an entire community, like, I think you would agree, like, when Robin Williams passed, like, the comedy community was, like, specifically very affected by that. But again, you're talking about somebody who's older, and that's what people keep saying is, like, you don't realize the amount of commitment that it takes to be an athlete at that level. Like, Kobe, sure, he had a family and he had other things that he was doing while he was playing, but, like, he was really just starting his real life that's not completely tied to being a great basketball player.
Yeah, he was still in a life prime and sort of in the earlier part of his career in the other thing, which there's not a lot of people in I think any industry, any public industry that you can think of in a similar way with that impact. So yeah,
right, and not even, obviously he was playing basketball since he was a little kid, but his NBA career, as it turns out, literally comprised half of his life.
Yeah. It's it's not a good sports week. Not a good feeling.
No, 2019 sucked balls, and 2020 is coming in real hot.
Really trying to top it. Well, guess what? You can follow us on Twitter. That'll make it all better. At Away Games Pod. On Instagram at Away Games Pod. Follow us there.
If you want to drown your sorrows in some sports betting, we recommend
Thrive Fantasy. Check them out.
It's not funny, but in a way that I can appreciate, like, darkly humorous things. I've been listening to a lot of ESPN 710, which is the like Los Angeles ESPN, and to hear them have to transition into ad reads is fucking brutal.
Right. Yeah, it's like, basically just this.
It's nonstop coverage, and then it's like, talking about the worst thing ever, and then it's like, do you like poker?
Yeah, not anymore. Yeah. But when are you back from LA?
I'm back Saturday.
All right, cool. So we will be live in the same place next week.
But there has been less. It feels like the Super Bowl isn't even going to happen.
Yeah, right. It's. I mean, there's not.
It just feels like an afterthought.
Yeah. There's been no real. It hasn't been in the forefront of anything. Yeah. Do you have a rooting interest between the two?
I kind of like to see the Chiefs win. I
Yeah,
think.
I'm going Chiefs. I typically go with the team where it's been longer since they won. Shout out to our faves. But also if I have friends who really care about it, I'll go with them. So
I feel like I think you were saying this before. Like you and I know more Chiefs fans.
Yeah,
I think, right?
my friend Mac Lethal put out a song for the Chiefs making it. So that's great. He's really psyched about it. So yeah, go Chiefs, I guess. And yeah, we'll be back live next week on Away Games. Hey, go sign Chris Bryant to an extension or something. Then we'll bust in early if there's fun news to talk about. But
yeah, we will.
Yeah. Otherwise, talk to you next week.